Okay, let's go then a bit, maybe we have 15 minutes and then we can have a more audience also taking part in this discussion, but maybe a few more points maybe about this prospects for peace or also the future of Ukraine. And well, there is an OSCE mission which we know that is very small and incapable of taking over, but what do you think, how has the OSCE sort of been acting? Because of course, as an outsider, you might think that that's an organization which represents sort of both east and west of Ukrainian states, including Russia and the European states, and also what sort of makes one wonder that at least in the Finnish media you very rarely see any statement, or they are not seen, or also many of the you don't see that because they have of course very strict command structure also that they don't comment, but I think it has been sort of a very silent organizers in the sense that would have been giving opinions about what's going on there or being sort of a real player on the ground. So what do you think is their handicaps and how they have performed there?
Well, I fully agree with you that the OSCE mission has a lot of handicaps, and the main problem is that they are hugely understaffed until now. And as a result, for instance, this is what I know from my own communication with people from the OSCE mission, and I personally do appreciate what they have been doing in these very difficult circumstances. So quite many of the OSCE observation mission staff have recently been redeployed from various parts of Russia to the east in order to specifically monitor their implementation of the Minsk agreements. So there's their own complaint is that this kind of military focus has overtaken over the human rights focus of the mission. So because they need to monitor the violations of the ceasefire, the firings, the sites, so all this military stuff. And this military stuff actually prevents them from communicating with locals. And besides that, another problem is that the mandate of the OSCE monitoring mission is very much limited. So they can't comment on the situation because it's not in their mandate. They can't recommend, although they do want to recommend also to Kiev to do to behave in a bit different way, so to say. And but at the same time, I can give you two very concrete examples of how much these people are actually doing in all these limited circumstances which they have. For instance, in the city of Slavyansk, which is a very difficult city for Ukraine, actually the war, the armed activities started with the armed activities in Slavyansk in May last year. Now this is exactly 1 year since armed clashes, the first armed clashes developed in Slavyansk. And since re-establishing control by Ukraine over this city, the situation inside the city has remained very, very tense. And the problem with this situation is that there are also volunteer formations stationed in the city, and the city is notoriously known for a huge number of abductions committed now by the Ukrainian security police and the army force. And so the field mission of the OSCE, the neighboring field mission to Slavyansk, is based in Kramatorsk, which is the center, the headquarters also for anti-terrorist operation of the Ukrainian army force. And in February, there were two particular abductions in Slavyansk of an 18-year-old girl and the father of 10 kids, all adopted, who you might have seen because actually that family, those kids, were in famous photos by Andrea Rocchelli, an Italian journalist who was killed in Slavyansk in May last year. So two people were abducted with a lot of witnesses and by people in Ukrainian uniform and everything. So I can tell you that only thanks to the recent mission, only thanks to the fact that relatives of those two abducted people managed to overcome their fear, and they decided that there was nothing else to lose. So they decided to speak up. They decided to go public. And the OSC mission in Kramatorsk and their superiors in Kiev actually made a very difficult decision for them, and they started to communicate to the relatives of the abducted people also in public. The miracle happened. Because the girl, that 18-year-old girl, was released without any charges against her. It was also kind of criminal because her release was with a handbag over her head and she was just thrown out of the car in Kramatorsk. The man was released on April the 6th after he had been moved to Dnipropetrovsk. And all the charges against him were dropped in a court trial. And so according to the mission, actually they were very happy with setting this kind of precedent. And when I spoke to them after the release of that man, so they told, at least now we have something to refer to in our communication to the Ukrainian authorities, telling them, come on, so even if you have armed activities, even if you have a war which you don't recognize, so you should observe the law. So it was very emotional for me to be a witness of how that man returned back home and how his children met him. But he is still threatened. And the shocking thing is that there were people from the Ukrainian ombudsman's office present during that very court trial, at which all the charges against him were dropped and he was released immediately in the courtroom. And immediately after that court trial, immediately after that decision, people from the Ukrainian ombudsman's office told him, are you serious to return to Slavyansk? It would be suicide. You should move to some other part of Ukraine. We can't ensure your safety if you return to Slavyansk. And the explanation to their recommendation, to the recommendation of the representatives of the Ukrainian state to this man was very simple. They don't have efficient control over their armed forces and over their security bodies.